What up, though? The 1619 Project examines the legacy of slavery in America. Our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black Americans have fought to make them true. By Nicole Hannah Jones, August 14th, 2019. Black Americans have fought to make them true. We know that black, there is no such thing as a black. We are Americans. Some might know us as American Indians. My dad always flew an American flag in our front yard. If you look at old paintings and old illustrations, not photographs of American Indians, a lot of times they had red, white, and blue feathered crowns and feathered kilts. Let's shake it. Nicole Hannah Jones, 2019, the 1619 Project. My dad always flew an American flag in our front yard. The blue paint on our two-story house was perennially chipping. The fence or the rail by the stairs or the front door existed in perpetual state of disrepair, but that flag always flew pristine. Why? Our corner lot, which had been redlined by the federal government, was along the river that divided the black side from the white side. I won't go into black and white throughout this show, but just know that black and white, black in the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, American Dictionary of the English Language, some of what black means is pale or bleached, and white, WIGHT, means creature. So when they say black side, more than likely they're speaking of American side or American Indian side. And when they say white, they could be speaking of anyone from Afro-Eurasia, of our Iowa town. At the end of our lawn, high on an aluminum pole, soared the flag, which my dad would replace as soon as it showed the slightest tatter. My dad was born into a family of sharecroppers on a white plantation in Greenwood, Mississippi, where black people bent over cotton from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, just as their enslaved ancestors had done not long before. And as we all know, enslaved is synonymous with laborer, worker, employee. And another side note is that during the census records, the wife and the children of the head of the household, which was known as the husband or the husbandman, i.e., farmer, the wife and the children were known as laborers or slaves, just as their enslaved ancestors had done not long before. And I'm telling you this because there has to be context. As we know, currently, people talk, and more talk. The Mississippi of Dad's youth was an apartheid state that subjugated its nearly majority black population, its majority black American population, through breathtaking acts of violence. It would be nice if she provided some of this violence, some of the records of this violence, because they kept records. White residents in Mississippi lynched more black people than those in any other state in the country. And the white people in my dad's home country lynched more black residents than those in any other county. White people in my dad's home county lynch more black residents than those in any other county in Mississippi, often for such crimes as entering a room occupied by white women, bumping into a white girl, or trying to start a sharecroppers union. How many people you think, how many American Indians do you think entered a room occupied by white women or bumped into a white girl? Me personally, if we look at today, the only so-called white people I saw were coming to shop in the hood. And I'm not talking about shop for clothing or food. So I didn't see any so-called white people in terms of coexisting until I was in high school. My dad's mother, like all the black people, properly American people in Greenwood, could not vote. So use the public library or find work other than toiling in the cotton fields or toiling in white people's houses. This was work. This what people did. They also toiled in the cotton fields for Americans, for niggas. They also worked in niggas' houses. So in the 1940s, she packed up her few belongings and her 3 small children and joined the flood of black Southerners, properly American Southerners, fleeing north. Context is important. There are many reasons why people go somewhere else in their homeland or on their soil. Me personally, I live hundreds of miles away from where I was born. Why? Because that's what I want to do. She got off the Illinois Central Railroad in Waterloo, Iowa, only to have her hopes of the mythical promised land shattered when she learned that Jim Crow did not end at the Mason-Dixon line. Grandmama, as we called her, like all of us I call her grandma, found a house in a segregated black neighborhood. She says segregated, but it was just Americans living there on the city's east side, and then found the work that was considered black woman's work, American woman's work, no matter where American women lived, cleaning white people's houses or cleaning people's houses. People clean people's houses to this day. Some people have lucrative cleaning businesses. I think we should try to start our own lucrative cleaning business. You have the tall buildings in downtown areas all over America. And you have cleaning crews who come in when the workday is over. Right? Right. Dad, in 1962, at age 17, he signed up for the Army. Like many young men, he joined in hopes of escaping poverty. But he went into the military for another reason as well, a reason common to black men, American men. Dad hoped that if he served his country might finally treat him as an American. It would have helped. I'm not sure if her father is still with us or he's made the transition, but it would have helped if we had a direct quote from him on why he did that, she said he went to the military for another reason as well, a reason common to black men. Dad hoped that if he served, she didn't say, my dad told me. Like all the black men and women in my family, he believed in hard work. But like all American men and women in my family, no matter how hard he worked, he never got ahead. I'm going to use black because she's using black. I'm not going to say American, which is what properly would describe her father and her and us. I'm going to use black for the purposes of this article she wrote. I want to stay true to the article that she wrote. That flag outside our home never made sense to me. How could this black man, having seen firsthand the way his country abused black Americans, how it refused to treat us as full citizens, proudly fly its banner? Who wants to be a full citizen of an occupying company? I didn't understand his patriotism. It deeply embarrassed me. How old was she at this time to be deeply embarrassed by something your father was doing? I can't relate to this. I had been taught in school that our history as a people began with enslavement. It seemed that the closest thing black Americans could have to cultural pride was to be found in our vague connection to Africa. That my dad felt so much honor in being an American felt like a marker of his degradation, his acceptance of our subordination. I thought I understood so much when in fact I understood so little. My father knew that our people's contributions to building the richest and most powerful nation in the world were indelible, that the United States simply would not exist without us, without our acquiescence. And don't get me wrong, the chairmen of the board of the United States Company, these are clever people, as well as wicked. In August 1619, just 12 years after the English settled Jamestown, Virginia, 1 year before the Puritans landed at Plymouth Rock, and some 157 years before the English colonists even decided they wanted to form their own country, the Jamestown colonists bought 20 to 30 enslaved Africans from English pirates. 20 to 30 enslaved Africans. Keep that in mind. In August 1619, this is what this woman is saying. In 1619, just 12 years after the English settled Jamestown, Virginia, the Jamestown colonists bought 20 to 30 enslaved Africans from English pirates, the poor Jamestown settlers, colonists, the destitute, the enslaved Jamestown colonists bought 20 to 30 enslaved Africans from English pirates. The pirates had stolen them from a Portuguese slave ship that had forcibly taken them from what is now the country of Angola. Keep these in mind. Keep these terms in mind. Destitute, poor Jamestown colonists bought 20 to 30 enslaved Africans from English pirates. The pirates had stolen them from a Portuguese slave ship that had forcibly taken them from what is now the country of Angola. Pull up a map, see where Angola is on that map. And see the distance from Angola to Jamestown. Those men and women who came ashore on that August day were the beginning of American slavery. I thought it was 20 to 30 enslaved Africans. She said men and women. How does she know? She's not saying whether they were men or women. They were Africans. Who knows from where? She says from English pirates. From Angola. She said that was the beginning of American slavery. No, it sounds like that was the beginning of African slavery. She didn't mention any Americans, right? They were among the 12.5 million Africans who would be kidnapped from their homes and brought in chains across the Atlantic Ocean in the largest forced migration in human history. They were among the 12.5 million Africans who would be kidnapped from their homes and brought in chains across the Atlantic Ocean in the largest forced migration in human history. So from 20 to 30 Africans to 12.5 million Africans. Almost 2 million did not survive the grueling journey known as the Middle Passage. It would help if she would name some of the sources where she got this information so we could look and see for ourselves, because this is a magnificent event. Before the abolishment of the international slave trade, 400,000 enslaved Africans would be sold into America. This is the story that we all get. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Through back-breaking labor, they cleared the land across the southeast. They taught the colonists to grow rice. The enslaved Africans taught the colonists to grow rice. They grew and picked the cotton that at the height of slavery was the nation's most valuable commodity. More than any other group in this country's history, she says we, including herself, not me, not you, but we, meaning her and people who she considers as people who look like her or are the same as her, Americans, have served generation after generation in an overlooked but vital role. It is we who have been the perfecters of this democracy. The very first person to die for this country in the American Revolution was a black man, was an American man. In every war this nation has waged since the first one, black Americans have fought. Today, we are the most likely of all racial groups to serve in the United States military. A despicable turn of events. The year 1619 is as important to the American story as 1776. Black Americans, as much as those men cast in alabaster in the nation's capital, are this nation's true founding fathers, and that no people has a greater claim to that flag than us. As Jefferson composed his inspiring words, however, a teenage boy who would enjoy none of those rights and liberties waited nearby to serve at his master's beck and call. His name was Robert Hemings, and he was the half-brother of Jefferson's wife. Born to Martha Jefferson's father and a woman he owned, it was common for white enslavers to keep their half-black children in slavery. Jefferson had chosen Hemings from among about 130 enslaved people that worked on the forced labor camp he called Monticello, or Monticello, or in my case, from where I'm from, the next block over from the block I grew up on, we called it Cello. To accompany him to Philadelphia and ensure his every comfort as he drafted the text making the case for a new democratic republic based on the individual rights of men. At the time, 1/5 of the population within the 13 colonies, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about 13 colonies, not 13 states. We're talking about 13 colonies, 13 groups of people. We don't know how many people those each colony consisted of. Could have been 20, could have been 10, could have been a couple of families. Within the 13 colonies struggled under a brutal system of slavery unlike anything that had existed in the world before. She didn't tell you who those people who were enslaved on those colonies were. Enslaved people could not legally marry. They were barred from learning to read and restricted from meeting privately in groups. They had no claim to their own children, who could be bought, sold, and traded away from them on auction blocks alongside furniture and cattle or behind storefronts that advertised Negroes for sale. Enslavers and the courts did not honor kinship ties to mother, siblings, cousins. In most courts, they had no legal standing. Yet, in making the argument against Britain's tyranny, one of the colonists' favorite rhetorical devices was to claim that they were the slaves to Britain. Conveniently left out of our founding mythology is the fact that one of the primary reasons the colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain was because they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. By 1776, Britain had grown deeply conflicted over its role in the barbaric institution that had reshaped the Western Hemisphere. In London, there were growing calls to abolish the slave trade. This would have upended the economy of the colonies in both the North and the South. In Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence, he tried to argue that it wasn't the colonists' fault. Instead, he blamed the King of England for forcing the institution of slavery on the unwilling colonists and called the trafficking in human beings a crime. It says Jefferson blamed the King of England for forcing the institution of slavery on the unwilling colonist. So the institution of slavery was forced on the colonist. Remember the 13 colonies? Remember those people who were brought here for a fee and had to pay off that fee? And understand the people who are in control or supervising or managing these people are possibly some of the most disgusting people. Some may be kind people, but some are the most disgusting people and could basically do what they want to these people who were going to work off their debt. There is no mention of slavery in the final Declaration of Independence. Similarly, 11 years later, when it came time to draft the Constitution, the framers carefully constructed a document that preserved and protected slavery without ever using the word. By the early 1800s, according to the legal historians Leland B. Ware, Robert J. Cottrell, and Raymond T. Diamond, white Americans, whether they engaged in slavery or not, had a considerable psychological as well as economic investment in the doctrine of black inferiority. This is garbage. White Americans, no such thing as a white American. These are Afro-Eurasians from a European country or African country or Caucasian or Asian. Whether they engaged in slavery or not, had a considerable psychological as well as economic investment in the doctrine of black inferiority. Now she's reading the minds of thousands of people. The Supreme Court enshrined this thinking in the law in its 1857 Dred Scott decision, ruling that black people, whether enslaved or free, came from a slave race. Well, black means pale, so they came from a Slavic race. This made them inferior to white people and therefore incompatible with American democracy, or properly, United States democracy. Democracy was for citizens. And the Negro race, the Americans, the court ruled was a separate class of persons, which the founders had not regarded as a portion of the people or citizens of the government's right, which was a good thing, and had no rights which a white man was bound to respect, and neither did a white man have any rights which we were bound to respect. On August 14th, 1862, a mere 5 years after the nation's highest courts declared that no black person could be an American citizen or a United States citizen, President Abraham Lincoln called a group of 5 esteemed free black men, free American men, to the White House for a meeting. It was one of the few times that black people had ever been invited to the White House as guests. The war was not going well for Lincoln. Britain was contemplating whether to intervene on the Confederacy's behalf, and Lincoln, unable to draw enough new white volunteers for the war, was forced to reconsider his opposition to allowing black Americans or American Indians to fight for their own liberation, or to fight for Lincoln and his master's cause. It was 243 years to the month since the first of their ancestors had arrived on these shores before. The Union had not entered the war to end slavery, but to keep the South from splitting off. Yet black men had signed up to fight. Enslaved people were fleeing their forced labor camps, which we like to call plantations, or I like to call plantations places where planting is happening, trying to join the effort, serving as spies, sabotaging Confederates, taking up arms for his cause as well as their own. And now Lincoln was blaming them for the war. Lincoln says, although many men engaged on either side do not care for you one way or the other, without the institution of slavery and the colored race, now it's the colored race, American Indian, as a basis, the war could not have an existence, the president told them. It is better for us both, therefore, to be separated. This is what Lincoln said. By summer, the Civil War was over, and 4 million black Americans, 4 million American Indians were suddenly free. Contrary to Lincoln's view, most were not inclined to leave, agreeing with the sentiment of a resolution against black colonization put forward at a convention of black leaders in New York some decades before. This is our home, and this is our country. Beneath its sod lie the bones of our fathers. Here we were born, and here we shall die. During this nation's brief period of Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877, formerly enslaved people zealously engaged with the democratic process. They headed in droves to the polls, where they placed other formerly enslaved people into seats that their enslavers had once held. Black Americans, or properly Americans, elected to local, state, and federal offices. Some 16 black men served in Congress. More than 600 black men served in southern state legislatures, and hundreds more in local positions. Perhaps their biggest achievement was the establishment of the most democratic of American institutions, the public school. Public school education effectively did not exist in the South before Reconstruction. Bravo, good for them. The white elite sent their children to private schools, while poor white children went without an education. Black legislatures successfully pushed for a universal state funded system of schools, not just for their own children, but for white children too. Black legislatures also helped pass the first compulsory education laws in the region. Southern children, black and white, were now required to attend schools like their northern counterparts. In some states, like Louisiana and South Carolina, small numbers of blacks and white children briefly attended schools together. In 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, making the United States one of the last nations in America to outlaw slavery. So in some states like Louisiana and South Carolina, small numbers of black and white children briefly attended school together. Then it says in 1865. So if we're talking 1865, this is 100 years before MLK was speaking of little black children and little white children playing together, right? In 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, making the United States one of the last nations in America to outlaw nations in the Americas to outlaw slavery. The following year, black Americans exerting their new political power pushed white legislatures to pass the Civil Rights Act, the nation's first such law and one of the most expansive pieces of civil rights legislation Congress has ever passed. It codified black American citizenship for the first time, prohibited housing discrimination, and gave all Americans the right to buy and inherit property, make and enforce contracts, and seek redress from courts. In 1868, Congress ratified the 14th Amendment, ensuring citizenship to any person born in the United States. Today, thanks to this amendment, every child born here to a European, Asian, African, Latin American, or Middle Eastern immigrant gains automatic citizenship, i.e., the right to have free stuff, aka yo stuff. Ever since, nearly all other marginalized groups have used the 14th Amendment in their fights for equality, including the recent successful arguments before the Supreme Court on behalf of same-sex marriage. In 1877, President Rutherford B. Hayes, in order to secure a compromise with Southern Democrats that would grant him the presidency in a contested election, agreed to pull federal troops from the South, with the troops gone, white Southerners quickly went about eradicating the gains of Reconstruction. The systemic white suppression of black life was so severe that this period between the 1880s and 1920 and 30s became known as the Great Nadir, or the Second Slavery. Democracy would not return to the South for nearly a century. Now, mind you, we spoke about a minute ago more than 600 black men served in Southern state legislatures and hundreds more in local positions. Black Americans elected to local, state, and federal offices. Some 16 black men served in Congress. Remember that. And she says, the systemic white suppression of black life was so severe that this period between the 1880s and the 1920s and 30s became known as the Great Nadir, or the Second Slavery. Democracy would not return to the South for nearly a century. White Southerners of all economic classes, on the other hand, thanks in significant part to the progressive policies and laws black people had championed. So black people championed the progressive policies and laws that would come to bite them in the ass. Experienced substantial improvement in their lives, even as they forced black people back into a quasi-slavery. The victimization of the nigger is a horrible thing, and in this case, quite diabolical and very dishonest. Use your natural sense. Yes, we read. Yes, we study. Yes, we take things into consideration. But you also were born with natural senses and natural sense. As Waters McIntosh, who had been enslaved in South Carolina, lamented, it was the poor white man who was freed by the war, not the Negroes. The war possibly was about white people being slaves, and not the American Indian, who was at the cookout, who was at the barbecue. It was the civil rights movement that led to the passage of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which upended the racist immigration quota system intended to keep this country white. No, it wasn't intended to keep the country white. It was to prevent the country from becoming everything else except American Indian, or what she's referring to as Black American. See? Look at today. Every turn. Because of the Black Americans, Black and brown immigrants from across the globe are able to come to the United States and live in a country in which legal discrimination is no longer allowed, and they have the benefit of getting your stuff. Because of Black Americans, because of the Black immigrants, foreigners from across the globe, then and now, are allowed to come here and get free stuff. that you gave them. It is a truly American irony that some Asian Americans, no such thing as an Asian American. If I go to Asia, I'm not going to be an American Asian. I'm going to be an American. And many Asians, many Germans, many people, many Italians, many Greeks put a hyphen and call themselves Americans, and they're committing identity theft. It is a truly American irony that some Asian Americans among the groups able to immigrate to the United States because of the Black civil rights struggle are now suing universities to end programs designed to help the descendants of the enslaved, and it backfired on both of y'all ass. And to this day, Black Americans are the most likely to support programs like universal health care and the higher minimum wage. Black Americans suffer the most from violent crime, yet we are the most opposed to capital punishment. Our unemployment rate is nearly twice that of whites. Yet we are still the most likely of all groups to say this nation should take in refugees. And when she says we, she's not speaking about me. Okay? Let's just get that clear. She ain't speaking about me. She's speaking for herself. When it occurred, no one can say for certain. Perhaps it was in the second week or the third, but surely by the fourth, when they had not seen their land or any land for so many days that they lost count. It was after fear had turned to despair, and despair to resignation, and resignation to an abiding understanding. The teal eternity of the Atlantic Ocean had severed them so completely from what has once been their home that it was as if nothing had ever existed before, as if everything and everyone they cherished had simply vanished from earth. They were no longer Mbundu or Akan or Fulani. These men and women from many different nations, all shackled together in the suffocating hull of the ship, they were one people now. Just a few months earlier, they had families and farms and lives and dreams. They were free. They had names, of course, but their enslavers did not bother to record them. They had been made black by those people who believed that they were white. And where they were heading, black equaled slave. And slavery in America required turning human beings into property by stripping them of every element that made them individuals. This process was called seasoning, in which people stole from Western and Central Africa were forced, often through torture, to stop speaking their native tongues and practicing their native religions. She makes it sound so romantic and disgusting at the same time. She's a liar, and the truth ain't with her. The insistence of many Black Americans, particularly those most marginalized, to give our children names that we create that are neither European nor from Africa, a place we have never been, is an act of self-determination. When the world listens to quintessential American music, it is our voice they hear. Our speech and fashion and the drum of our music is not African. In turn, mainstream society has coveted our style, our slang, and our song, seeking to appropriate the one truly American culture as its own. What this woman is doing is sprinkling a little poison in the Kool-Aid. At 43, she says, I am part of the first generation of Black Americans in the history of the United States to be born into slavery, in which Black people had full rights of citizenship. Black people suffered under slavery for 250 years. We have been legally free for just 50. She says, and when I say she, I mean Nicole Hannah Jones. When I was a child, I must have been in 5th or 6th grade, a teacher gave our class an assignment intended to celebrate the diversity of the great American melting pot, to our detriment. She instructed each of us to write a short report on our ancestral land and then draw that nation's flag. As she turned to write the assignment on the board, the other black girl in class locked eyes with me. Slavery had erased any connection we had to an African country. And even if we tried to claim the whole continent, there was no African flag. It was hard enough being one of 2 black kids in the class, and this assignment would just be another reminder of the distance between the white kids and us. In the end, I walked over to the globe near my teacher's desk, picked a random African country, and claimed it as my own. Sound familiar? We have a lot of niggas just spinning the globe and picking a random African country and claiming it as their own. Do what you want to do. That's your business. I wish now that I could go back to the younger me and tell her that her people's ancestry started here on these lands, and to boldly, proudly draw the stars and those stripes of the American flag. Nicole Hannah Jones is a staff writer for the magazine, a 2017 MacArthur Fellow. I thought she was a female. I say MacArthur Fellow. Fellow means something else. She has won a National Magazine Award, a Peabody Award, and a George Polk Award. Okay. Remember, she said 1619, pivotal moment. 20 to 30 Africans stolen by the English from a Portuguese slave ship that picked up those 20 to 30 Africans from Angola, which would later become 12.5 million so-called Africans stolen and brought here. And Nicole was saying that this is who we are. We're from those people, is what she says. John Rolfe recounts the arrival of slaves in Virginia, 1619. This is who it all started with. 1619 has morphed into a lucrative business. But for now, let's shake it. John Rolfe recounts the arrival of slaves in Virginia, 1619. An account by John Rolfe of the Jamestown colony's first exposure to slaves from Africa via Dutch traders. Arbor Edward, Travels and Works of Captain John Smith, President of Virginia and Admiral of New England, 1580 to 1631, Edinburgh. John Grant, 1910, Volume 2, pages 540 through 543. In May 1619, came in the Margaret of Bristol with 34 men, all well and in health, and also many devout gifts. And we were much troubled in examining some scandalous letters sent into England to disgrace this country with barrenness, to discourage the adventurers, and so bring it and us to ruin and confusion. Notwithstanding, we find by them of best experience an industrious man, not other ways employed, may well tend 4 acres of corn and 1,000 plants of tobacco. They say also English wheat will yield but 16 bushels an acre, and we have reaped 30. Besides, to manure the land, no place hath more white and blue marble than here. Had we but carpenters to build and make carts and plows, and skillful men that know how to use them, and train up our cattle to draw them, which though we endeavor to effect, yet our want of experience brings but little to perfection, but planting tobacco. He says, had we but carpenters to build and make carts and plows, and skillful men that know how to use them, and train up our cattle to draw them, which though we endeavor to effect, yet our want of experience brings but little to perfection, but planting tobacco. They ain't know how to do shit. Your idea of these colonists is equivalent to the white supremacy that you feel today. It's unfounded. About the last of August 1619 came in a Dutch man of war that sold us 20 negars. This was the first introduction of Negro slavery into Virginia. Now, Nicole said 20 to 30 Africans, right? The 1619 project. 20 to 30 Africans, right? This is what it's built on. Just like I said, the 1619 thing has become big business. 20 to 30 Africans, right? Stolen from a Portuguese ship who just grabbed the Africans from Angola, right? This is John Rolfe's letter. About the last of August 1619 came in a Dutch man of war that sold us 20 negars. This was negars. This was the first introduction of Negro slavery into Virginia. In December 1619, Captain Ward returned from Patawamek. The people were dealt falsely with him. The people there dealt falsely with him, so that he took 800 bushels of corn from them per force. Captain Woodruff of Bristol came in not long after with all his people lusty and in health. And we had two particular governors sent us under the titles of deputies to the company, the one to have charge of the college lands and the others of the companies. Now you are to understand that because there have been many complaints against the governors, captains, and officers in Virginia for buying and selling men and boys, or to be set over from one to another from a yearly rent, was held in England a thing most intolerable, or that the tenants or lawful servants should be put from their places or abridged their covenants, was so odious that the very report thereof brought a great scandal to the general action. The council in England did send many good and worthy instructions for the amending of those abuses, and appointed 100 men should at the company's charge be allotted and provided to serve and attend the governor during the time of his government, which number he was to make good at his departure, and leave to his successor in like manner 50 to the deputy governor of the college land, and 50 to the deputy of the company's land, 50 to the treasurer, to the secretary 5 and 20, and more to the marshal and cape merchant, which they are also to leave to their successors, and likewise to every particular officer such a competency as he might live well in his office without oppressing any under their charge. Which good law I pray God it be well observed. And then we may truly say in Virginia, we are the most happy people in the world. By me, John Rolfe. About the last of August 1619 came in a Dutch man of war that sold us 20 negars. This was the first introduction of Negro slavery into Virginia. Let's go to Wikidata. Remember, negars. Wikidata. Nagar. Female given name. Nagar, Javaharian, Iranian actress. Nagar Farazande, Iranian actress. Nagar Khan, Norwegian, Iranian Bollywood actress. Shiva Nagar, Iranian Canadian actress and model. Nagar Abedi, Iranian actress. This is from Behind the Name. Nagar, feminine, Persian, means beloved in Persian. Gender, feminine, means beloved in Persian. This is from Veneer, The Meaning of Names, the meaning and history of the name Nagar. The name Nagar carries with it a rich tapestry of cultural and historical significance, often imbued with poetic and endearing qualities. This beautiful name has been a cornerstone in various cultures, captivating many through its simplicity and depth. The name Nagar is predominantly of Persian origin. In Persian, it means beloved, sweetheart, or a painting or image. The imagery associated with Nagar often conjures thoughts of beauty, art, and affection. Furthermore, it symbolizes something cherished and adored, making it a popular choice for those seeking a name rich in meaning and tradition. And when I speak of this Nagar, I'm not saying that the 20 Nagars that John Rolfe said was brought from a man of war ship were from Persia. But what I'm saying is that their understanding of the term Nagar, in Persian, it means beloved, sweetheart, or a painting or image. The imagery associated with Nagar often conjures thoughts of beauty, art, and affection. What I'm saying is that the Nagars, the females, the women or girls, they possibly saw them as sweethearts or beautiful, but feminine nonetheless. Tracing back centuries, the name Nagar has been mentioned in Persian literature and poetry, especially prevalent in works by revered poets such as Rumi and Hafez. Its lyrical and harmonious sound made it a favorite among poets and authors who often used it to describe the beloved or beautiful image. In this case, the 20 Nagars could have been beloved and beautiful females and or girls from the Americas. As Persian culture spread across the regions, the name Nagar evolved, sometimes taking on slight variations in spelling and pronunciation depending on the local dialects and languages. Despite these subtle changes, the core meaning and essence of the name remained intact. The name has also found resonance in communities with a Persian diaspora, including parts of Europe and North America. Let's shake it. Another prominent figure is Negar Mortazavi, an Iranian American journalist and analyst who has made significant strides in international media. Her work exemplifies the strength and versatility that the name Negar can represent. Although not the most common name, Negar continues to be a name that carries with it an air of grace, beauty, and love. Think for yourself. Think for yourself. Constitution 101 course. Come see an original Bill of Rights, National Constitution Center. Constitution 101 with Khan Academy, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On September 9, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted a new name for what had been called the United Colonies, the moniker United States of America. Thomas Jefferson is credited as being the first person to come up with the name, which he used while drafting the Declaration of Independence. In June 1776, Jefferson's draft version of the Declaration started with the following sentence: a declaration of the representatives of the United States of America. In General Congress assembled, the final version of the Declaration starts with the date July 4th, 1776, and the following statement: the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. On Monday, September 9th, 1776, the Congress moved to approve some important resolutions, including payments for the Army. The fifth resolution read as follows: that in all continental commissions and other instruments where heretofore the words United Colonies have been used, the still be altered for the future to the United States. Home Geography and Travel Countries of the World United States article. United States Summary. Explore the social, economic, and political history of the United States. The editors of Encyclopedia Britannica. National Anthem of the United States. The instrumental version of the National Anthem of the United States. The population includes people of European and Middle Eastern ancestry, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, Pacific Islanders, American Indians, Native Americans, and Alaska Natives. The U.S. is among the world's leading producers of several minerals, including copper, silver, zinc, gold, coal, petroleum, and natural gas. It is the chief exporter of food. Its manufacturers include iron and steel, chemicals, electronic equipment, motor vehicles, computers, and textiles. The territory was originally inhabited for several thousand years by numerous American Indian peoples who had probably migrated from Asia. The English settled Jamestown, Plymouth, Mass, 1620. The English settled Jamestown, Virginia, Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. The territory was originally inhabited for several thousands of years or before they tell us several thousand years, by numerous American Indian peoples. American Indian peoples who had probably migrated from Asia. They tack on the probably migrated from Asia in order to keep the lie alive. And the lie has survived. The U.S. suffered disunity during the conflict between the slavery-based plantation economy in the South and the industrial agricultural economy in the North, culminating in the American Civil War and the abolition of slavery under the 13th Amendment. After Reconstruction, the U.S. experienced rapid growth, urbanization, industrial development, and heightened European immigration. After Reconstruction from 1865 to 77, the U.S. experienced rapid growth, urbanization, industrial development, and check this, and heightened European immigration. In 1887, it authorized allotment of American Indian reservation land to individual tribes people, resulting in widespread loss of land to whites. The U.S. granted suffrage to women in 1920 and citizenship to American Indians in 1924 under a different name other than American Indians, under the new name of colored people, people of color. 1828, Noah Webster's American Dictionary of the English Language. American, American, pertaining to America. America, a native of America. Originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. Not found, but were here when the Europeans landed, because we weren't lost. Originally American, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Do the right thing.